You're listening to the Martin Clinic Wellness Podcast. This is the show where we bring you the best tips, tricks, and nutritional hacks to help you and your family get healthier. You will also hear what works and doesn't work, so you don't have to waste your time and money. All right, let's get started. Hello, my name is Dr. Tony Martin Jr. of the Martin Clinic, and I'm here with my dad, Dr. Tony Martin Sr., also of the Martin Clinic. And on today's episode, we want to talk about insulin. Now, listen, if you've been listening to our podcast, you know that we talk a lot about insulin. But what we want to do today is we want to kind of come at it from a little bit of a different perspective. We want to just basically talk about all the different conditions, in a sense, that are caused by insulin. And this is just based off of research studies that have been done. So what we've done is we've kind of summarized the research that's out there, and we're going to show you how insulin is involved in each of these conditions and why controlling insulin is the single most important thing that you can do for your health. If you want to age healthy, if you want to feel healthy, you must keep insulin levels low, because insulin is the single most important factor behind many of the diseases that are plaguing us today. So we want to get into, we want to talk about all things insulin, just again, because once you start to see some of these things that are linked to insulin, you'll understand why we preach insulin all the time.
Yeah.
So let's go through a few things. Now, first of all, again, we've talked a lot about insulin in the past. Let's just give a real quick summary for those that might just be discovering our podcast for the first time here, or they haven't heard us speak on this too much. But let's just real quickly start off by saying this. Glucose is toxic to your body. So much so that you only need a very little amount in your blood at any given time to function. If you were to drain all your blood out of your body, and how much blood do we have in our body?
Between 4 and 5 liters.
So if you were to drain 4 or 5 liters out of your body, and then, out of that blood that's in there, so you got 4 or 5 liters of blood, if you were to take the amount of blood sugar, the amount of glucose that's in there, it's always amazing how much you'd actually need.
You don't need much.
It's less than a half a teaspoon.
Yeah.
So, we think of glucose. Glucose in our blood is so tightly regulated because we need so little. So what happens when we eat food, and because foods today are so processed, and because foods today are so high carb compared to what they used to be, our system gets flooded, because carbs basically get turned into glucose in our blood, right? Eventually it gets broken down. Carbs get broken down pretty quickly. So there's a rapid surge of glucose in our blood. And because it's toxic, we have a hormone that's specifically there. One of its functions is to lower glucose in your blood. And so it takes that glucose and it either stores it in your muscle, stores it in your liver, and once those are full, because your liver can hold about 100 grams.
That's not much.
No. Your muscles can store maybe 400 to 500 grams, depending on the size of the muscles the person has. Anything above that, it has no place to store it. So what does it do? It makes fat. It takes the glucose and it stores it in fat. If the fat cells are full, it makes more fat, so you have an unlimited storage capacity in the form of fat cells. Because, again, the reason why this happens is because if you can't burn it off or you can't put it in storage, your body it can't keep it in your blood system. It's toxic. So it has to do something. So that's where insulin comes in. Insulin comes in to get rid of that excess glucose in your blood, and it tries to store it in the liver, store it in the muscles, or it stores it in the fat cells. And so we have this. That's what insulin. So you can think of the problem. The more glucose that ends up in our blood and the more insulin has to do work, insulin is always present. And that's where the term, what we call hyperinsulinemia, too much insulin, leads to insulin resistance, meaning, like anything else, right? If your cells always have to respond to insulin, after a while, they get tired of listening to it. So they just ignore it. So what does your body do? It just makes more insulin. So it just starts to yell louder.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening. So now we have too much insulin over a period of time. So let's talk about now the downside of that. Because when that happens...
Well, let me give an example again, okay? Just because people like to get examples. And you wrote on the walls in the clinic, because I show this to patients every day and they like it. So instead of me giving you a spanking for writing on my walls at the clinic, I accept it. But what did you do? You put down a little Yoplait yogurt, like it's only 4 ounces, right? It has enough sugar to be equivalent to 2.5 Krispy Kreme donuts, right? And then you put down, just below it, you put Campbell's tomato soup. So you're having a serving of Campbell's tomato soup, for lunch, which, North Americans love, right? And that is equivalent to 2 Krispy Kreme donuts of sugar, right? What? Like sugar in Campbell's tomato soup? Yep. Read the label. You'll be shocked. So people that think, oh, no, I'm not really secreting that much insulin, they are over-secreting. Because the number one, and we've talked about this on other podcasts, so I won't go into a lot of detail, but the number one choice of women in North America for their first meal of the day is what? Yogurt. And they got 2.5 Krispy Kreme donuts of sugar in it. And they go, well, I like yogurt. Yeah, you might like it, but your insulin is going crazy. So anyway, that's the point that, so if you're wondering why we talk about insulin, it's because we are using that hormone like there's no tomorrow. And that's one of the biggest issues as we go on with this podcast, you'll see what we're talking about, the connection.
So that was a very quick overview primer on why insulin has become such an issue and why it is a problem. So now let's talk about some of the most common conditions that are absolutely linked to insulin. Now, obviously, aside from obesity and weight gain, which, we talk about a lot in our books and we talk a lot in our podcast, so that's a given. And we've talked about insulin resistance a fair amount. Now, let's start talking about a few of the other things that maybe not so common or people maybe not associate with insulin. Let's talk about a few things. Well, again, we've ranted on this so many times about the actual cause of diabetes, type 2 diabetes. Yeah. First of all, can we change the names of diabetes? Type 1 and type 2 diabetes are so different. It's crazy. Yeah. That, they call type 1 juvenile and type 2
adult.
It's unfortunate, right? It really is unfortunate. Type 2 diabetes, we've talked about this ad nauseum, so we're not going to get into it too much. But it is not a disease of high blood sugar. It is a disease of too much insulin. Insulin is the actual root cause of type 2 diabetes. Control insulin, you control type 2 diabetes.
Simple as that.
It is. It is as simple as that. There was an interesting study that came out. We had talked about this last week that talked about the number one indicator of healthy aging being inflammation.
Yeah.
They used to think it had to do with the telomere length, which, again, we've talked about in past podcasts, and that is important, but it's not as important as chronic inflammation. Essentially, the lack of inflammation, better aging, healthier, happier aging. The more inflammation a person has, the more miserable their aging becomes.
Yeah, and folks, just to simplify inflammation, just think about it for a minute. What happens when you get a cold? It'll run you right out, right? Because your body's ambulance system has gone crazy, right? It's sending extra blood supply. It's sending extra enzymes. It's sending extra, healing, extra, T cells, and you name it, right, to the area. If you have a head cold, you know what it's like, right? You're just dying, and that's inflammation on steroids. But that's the kind of thing that happens inside the body when you have a poor diet You know, you're eating sugar all the time. It's very inflammatory. When you're getting bombarded by chemicals, you're getting bombarded by stress. All these things, lead to an inflammatory response.
If you want to take a big picture view of any disease, there's not a disease on this planet that can't start without inflammation. Yeah. There's inflammation somewhere along the path to that disease. And too much insulin over a period of time leads to chronic inflammation. That should be it alone. I mean, that really, you can go from chronic inflammation to any disease that's out there. So again, the importance of controlling, people spend a lot of money on anti-aging. They want to look better as they age. If you want to age better, keep your insulin low. And in fact, studies are showing that aging is due to organs becoming insulin resistant.
Yeah.
Don't help it out by
your brain and
don't help it out.
Yeah.
Don't become insulin resistant faster than you should be as we age. So if you want to age healthy, you want to prevent chronic inflammation, which is why, again, and let's not get ahead of ourselves. Too much insulin leads to chronic elevated inflammation. That's a big problem.
And it's deadly.
All right, so we talked about type 2 diabetes. We talked about chronic inflammation. We talked about weight gain, obesity. Let's talk about, you just mentioned it. Let's talk about the brain. Every generation has their end-of-life issues.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of shifts every generation. What we're seeing now, and which is becoming more and more of a problem, is that the body is living longer than the brain. Yeah. The body is still functioning,
the truth,
but the brain isn't.
Yeah.
And we're going to do a podcast coming up shortly on a few of the things that happen when the brain ages. But the reality is the brain is aging faster than the rest of the body.
Yeah, because I saw a lady again today, and 81, but tremendous shape. Not her mind, though. Like, she looked good, like I said, this woman in my head, thinking she could live easily to 100. And she walked good, a good posture.
But the brain's aging faster.
But the brain is aging, and she just got no more memory, and dementia set in.
Well, and that's the thing. Dementia and Alzheimer's, our opinion, the number one cause of both those things is too much insulin. The brain actually becomes insulin resistant.
Well, what do they call Alzheimer's? Type 3 diabetes.
And we've been saying that for years, right? I mean, it really is. And what's interesting is that a person doesn't have to necessarily have type 2 diabetes, but they can have it in their brain. Because the brain uptakes glucose like anything else, and it can become insulin resistant. Your cells of the rest of your body might not be, but your brain might be. So somebody can have too much insulin for a long period of time, and they may not even some people will gain weight. Other people won't gain weight. Majority do, but some don't, but their brains may age faster. Yeah. So you start to see dementias and Alzheimer's. If you want to protect your brain as you age, there's nothing more important than keeping your insulin levels low. No question. All right. So we got Alzheimer's and dementia in there. On our podcast that we released not too long ago, we talked about cancer. And we talked about how, obesity raises the risk of the 13 most common types of cancers. Diabetes raises the risk of the most common cancers because there's something that happens in the biochemistry of obesity and type 2 diabetes that makes people more prone to cancer. And guess what that is?
Yep.
Obesity, type 2 diabetes are all characterized by the same thing, too much insulin.
Yep.
So a lot of the cancers, if you want to prevent a lot of these cancers, you want to keep your insulin levels low for a long period of time. That's just the reality of the situation. Yeah. So your brain, cancer.
And cancer, I mean, it's catching up now. It's actually catching up to heart disease as the number one killer in North America.
Yeah.
We're not, we talked about this before, but we're not winning the war on cancer.
No, we're not winning the war on cancer.
Because we're looking for love in all the wrong places. We are actually We're looking for a drug when the answer is food.
And the funny thing is, okay, so the top 2 killers today are what?
Heart disease and cancer.
Right? And cancer linked, not all the time, but a lot of the main cancers are definitely could be linked to...
The ones that are really prevalent in society today.
Yeah, are definitely linked to that. And then let's look at the other top killer, which is heart disease.
Yeah.
We've said this before. Dr. Kraft, who studied this in ad nauseum, has shown that any kind of heart disease is undiagnosed diabetes. It's an insulin problem.
If you have high blood pressure, folks, you have high insulin resistance.
Yes, you have undiagnosed type 2 diabetes.
What he said, right? He said you're actually a diabetic.
If you were to do the insulin assay properly, they would be diabetic.
Yeah.
Right? Because the testing for diabetes right now is terrible. I mean, it's like, they can have high blood sugar and they can have, but it's just, it is. It's unfortunate, right? Oh, no, you're not diabetic, but your sugars are high. No. Your insulin, if you were to measure insulin and their insulin response, they are insulin resistant. They are diabetic. Yeah. And you know they are because they have high blood pressure. You know they are because they have, peripheral artery disease. They got circulation issues into their feet. They got circulation into their hand. That is insulin, too much insulin. So you have the top killers, the top 2 killers associated with elevated insulin levels. Another one, which is very interesting, is that we talked about this on a podcast not too long ago. One of the top causes of joint pain is insulin. Too much insulin. And we're not talking about, again, like the disclaimer, if you played football, blew your knee out, you broke your ankle, whatever. We're not talking about that. We're talking about you worked in an office your whole life and you got osteoarthritis everywhere, or that's too much insulin.
Yeah.
That's way too much insulin, which is causing inflammation. It's eating the joint. It's doing a whole bunch of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So
and creating uric acid. So a lot of people are walking around. They have no idea, but they have undiagnosed gout, and they don't know it because all they think of is, I got unexplained pain in my hand. I got unexplained pain in my knee. I got unexplained pain in my foot, and I have arthritis. Yeah, you have gouty arthritis. Like when you see those uric acid crystals at the end of your fingers. That's a problem of insulin. It's a problem of sugar. It's a problem of, you know what I mean? And when I get people to eliminate it, their joint pain goes away.
Oh, it's insane. It is. Yeah. It's so again, as we wrap up this podcast episode, we just wanted to give you an overview why we talk so much about
every
insulin.
Organ in your body, think of it. All the major ones. We didn't even talk about kidneys.
No, we didn't talk about kidneys because kidneys is controlled again by how insulin. The funny thing is this. If we were to try to explain this as best as possible, is that you have 5, like you said, let's just say 5 liters of blood flowing through your body, right? You have 5 liters of blood. You have blood vessels that go to every ounce of your body. Right? They have tiny blood vessels, big blood vessels. They go to every ounce in your body. When insulin gets secreted, it's secreted into your circulatory system. It gets into your blood and it goes everywhere. Some people are going to feel the effects of insulin in their joints. Some people are going to feel the effects of insulin in their skin. Some people are going to feel it in their brain. Some people are going to put it in their fat cells. It could be anything.
Yeah. And we didn't talk about major organs like the liver and like I said, the kidneys and liver disease today is just
non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is becoming a major issue. Yeah. Because it used to be, it was pretty much, they call it non-alcoholic fatty liver disease because the majority of people got liver disease from alcohol. Yeah. Now it's insane, right? So that's why we talk so much about insulin and so much about the effects of insulin that it has on your whole body. It really is the single most important thing that you can do for your health is controlling your insulin levels.
Yeah.
All right.
If you do nothing else, right?
If you do nothing else.
Nothing else, folks. If you do nothing else, cut your insulin down, cut your carbohydrates down. If you one step will make an enormous difference in your health.
Well, again, we want to thank you for listening to this episode. If you have any questions, you can reach us at info@martinclinic.com. Or, again, we would encourage you to like our Facebook page because, again, we do, about once a week we do a Facebook Live where we answer your questions directly. And we always have a lot of fun doing that, and we get a lot of great questions. So, again, if you want to be notified when we go live, then you have to like our Facebook page. So you can do that. And if you don't subscribe to our newsletters, that is, we release a ton of information every week through newsletters and emails, so we would encourage you to do that. Again, we want to thank you for listening, and be sure to tune in again next week. You've been listening to the Martin Clinic Wellness Podcast, brought to you by martinclinic.com. We are truly thankful that you took the time out of your busy day to listen. Talk soon.